And anyone out there in the blogosphere, hello, welcome. I'm staring at the speaker, the microphone. And just feel free if you are listening to this either when it's streaming or after the fact to email me at myobun@me.com or contact the Zendo if you want handouts or follow-up. Water. So good. Is that someone joining us? Oh, okay. Hello, Wendy. Oh, Esho,
I'm
can
a
you
new student. Maybe I should sit in the back.
No, I think. Oh, here, let's tighten up. Esho, can you get Sunday Dharma books for sutra books for everyone? We're gonna start with the Heart Sutra. Maybe you could just get the Sunday ones.
Okay.
I think Micah is visiting his wife, and Emma is in LA, and I'm not sure if Mio's in where she wasn't able to be here last week, so welcome. And Colin is joining us, and Esho is joining us for the first time. So let me just say a few words to orient. And back to you, Wendy. So, you know, the Paramitas, this is a classic teaching, and the numbering, like many, many things in Buddhism, there are, you know, competing lists of things, and the lists we can get very, very, the lists are really good teaching tools, but we can get very hung up on, am I remembering all the Eightfold Path parts? Am I remembering the exact Paramitas? The Paramitas, for instance, in the Theravadan tradition, the list is of 10 paramitas, and in Mahayana, like Zen, Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about 6 paramitas. So does that mean that somehow, you know, the Theravadins got it wrong? No, it's just that these numberings, you know, they're ways of us breaking down the understanding of the Buddha Dharma in different ways in different times to help us grapple with what is, in fact, a seamless whole of interconnected parts, like everything is. But the paramitas, the teaching of the paramitas, sometimes they're referred to as training bases, like a basis for training, that they are descriptions of ideal ways of living in the world, that like virtues that you might aspire to. And the classic description of the 6 is dana, which is often translated as generosity or giving, Shila, which is sometimes translated as ethics or discipline, conduct. Then we have Kshanti, which is translated often as patience or constancy or forbearance. We're going to talk more about Kshanti today. We talked about last week. And then Virya, which gets translated as vigor or zeal or like heroic effort. You know, these are Sanskrit words. Again, like the numbering, the way they get translated varies from teacher to teacher, from tradition to tradition, moment to moment. So not to get too tight about this stuff, but these are tools for training. And then the 5th paramita is dhyana, which dhyana is the Sanskrit term that the word Zen comes from. Zen is just the American pronunciation of the Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese pronunciation of dhyana. And so dhyana is like meditation or concentration. And then the 6th paramita, which is actually at the center of them all, which is why that image that I think Andy gave you of the star, the 5-pointed star, that's how I envision it, that the 6th paramita, wisdom, prajna, is really at the center. And it's contained in all of them. And it's also the heart that holds this teaching together. So we can think of these as virtues that we are trying to embody, like I want to be a good bodhisattva, I want to be a good person in the world. But we can also think of them as descriptions of, you know, what it means to live in an awakened heart, which is actually all of us. We are all of us awakened. We may be awakened in a very sleepy state. But when the Buddha, when Siddhartha sat down with great virya, great vigor, and said, I'm not getting up until I'm enlightened, enlightenment or bust, when he sat down under the Bodhi tree, and then, had his realization, his words, I, together with the great earth and all beings, at this moment am awakened. His awakening included all of us, because his awakening was to the truth of that deep interconnection of all things. So we're all awakened, sleepy or not, recording live or not. Maybe, yes, okay. We're all awakened. So these 6 virtues, they all actually describe how we live. Imperfectly, we're not perfectly expressing any of them, but that perfection is not something that like all perfect things, it's not something that exists in this kind of complete faceted way. It's the spirit that's carried in all of our actions, which are imperfect and incomplete and finite, because we are finite partial beings. So, every time we give a gift, whether we consider it a good gift or a true gift or a real gift or a bad gift or a gift that was, not given, that you ever give a gift to someone, you're like, you kind of don't want to give it up. Like have you ever had a precious something and you think, I should give this to this person I love. I'm going to give them my favorite whatever. And you're like, you really don't want to give this up. And you think, even if you give it up to them, that you sort of didn't give the gift because your heart would. Generosity is still expressed completely in your action. It's still expressed completely in your action. It's just we are partial beings. So this is what on Sunday when I was talking about, what it is to circumambulate the heart of wisdom. We can't hold on to perfection, because what would that mean? Like, if you could hold on to perfection, then it wouldn't include everything, right? It could be something that so we can't ever grasp it, but it is the spirit that is expressed in all of our gestures, simply because we are part of the awakened world that the Buddha articulated in his lion's roar. I, together with all beings in the great earth, awaken at this time. So at a practical level, these become bases for training, because we can actually ask ourselves, well, what is generosity? We can ask ourselves, what does it mean to live a disciplined, ethical life? What does it mean to be patient? We can ask ourselves that. We can be inspired by examples, right? This is why, I'm using these stories as a teaching tool, these stories of the Jataka tales, these old ancient folk tales about, the Buddha's lives, many, many, many lives before he was the Buddha, when he was, the Bodhisattva with a capital B. He was on the path, like all of us, right? Living life after life after life. These stories have been used for centuries as teaching tools about the paramitas, because this is how it works. We see in examples something like, I wish I could be like that person. And that makes us wonder, what is it that they're doing? What is being expressed? Why was that such a beautiful thing that person just did? One of the things that I use all the time is I think about, I shared a YouTube video about Kate, the Great Dane, and Pippin, the deer, and their friendship. I'm like, what is it about that story and those cute animal stories that captivate us? Anytime we're captivated by something that seems good and true and sweet, we should ask ourselves what's being expressed here. And in doing that, the descriptions of these paramitas, they help us. That's why they're training tools. They help us articulate the ideals that we are already holding in our hearts. Okay, so that was my overview. Did that make sense for people who are coming to this brand new? Did it make sense for people who've been listening to me yak for the past few weeks? Paramita?
The book.
Oh, here. It's not, you can get it on Amazon, but I don't think it's still in print. So it's not expensive, but I think it's a little out of print. But he's got tons of books. He's just got a new book out. He's a wonderful teacher. Okay, did that make sense? And this is kind of like those, who are doing precept study or done precept study. It's kind of like the way people relate or considering precept study, considering taking the precepts. It's kind of like the way we work with the precepts too. It's like, okay, not killing. What is killing? Says the Dharma teacher who has rats in her house and is trying to figure out how to eradicate them. That's killing. So am I breaking like what? But life eats, like, how do I make sense of this? It's that kind of work that we're doing, that kind of exploration. But as I was saying, at the center of what the teaching of the Paramitas are is whatever Prajna is, the perfection of wisdom, Prajna Paramita, who sits on our altar to the left of the Buddha and is considered the mother of all Buddhas. So she's a figure that we venerate, but it's also just wisdom, and Buddhism is not the only world tradition that has venerated wisdom. In the biblical tradition, the relationship to wisdom, the wisdom teachings are huge. In Greek, Sophia, what it is to be a philosopher, a lover of wisdom, that is a spiritual path in the days of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. So, that name, Sophia, this is wisdom. On a practical level, whatever it means to have a wise heart, and on this kind of venerated level as well. So, can I get one too?
Yeah.
I mean, most of us know these words out by heart, but it's always hard when you chant them or speak them out. So, the prajna at the center of the perfections, and the word paramita just gets translated often as perfection or transcendent. So, the perfect wisdom. In the Zen school, we are, at the center of our liturgy, at the center of our scriptures that we read are these Prajna Paramita sutras, the Heart Sutra. That's the heart. The heart of Zen is wisdom. And we chant this every Sunday. And we chant it in Sino-Japanese every day. So let's just read this together. We won't try to chant it. But let's just read this together and start here. Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing Prajna Paramita, clearly saw that all five aggregates are empty and thus relieved all suffering. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself form. Sensations, perceptions, formations, and consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. They neither arise nor cease, are neither defiled nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. Therefore, given emptiness, there are no forms, sensations, perceptions, formations, or consciousness. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind. No sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind. No realm of sight, and so forth, down to no realm of mind consciousness. There is neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, and so forth, down to neither old age and death, nor extinction of old age and death. No suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path, no knowledge, and no attainment. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on Prajna Paramita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on Prajna Paramita and thereby attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore, know the Prajna Paramita as the great miraculous mantra, the great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the incomparable mantra, which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Therefore, we proclaim the Prajna Paramita mantra, the mantra that says Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Svaha. So, not the first time we've heard this recitation. How do you guys understand this sutra? Like, what is it? Just on whatever level, what do you understand of it? What does it mean to you? What do you, on any level, the very, what parts of it make sense to you? And this is not a trick question. This is. Who's the key figure? Who's Avalokiteshvara? Let's just start with that. Do we know who that is? What bodhisattva that is? And we've talked about, yeah, go ahead.
Compassion.
Yeah, compassion. And we've talked about, that I've been stressing in this class, and I said this on Sunday too. We're all bodhisattvas. We're all beings of awakening, because the Buddha announced that. He's like, I didn't just come to realization. My realization is that we're all awakened, that we are all in this together. We are all one heart of wisdom. That's all of us. Consciousness, mind, it's all shining and beautiful. That's the Buddhist good news, So we're all bodhisattvas. That word literally means beings of awakening. And there are also like bodhisattvas with a capital B, these like, kind of special beings that we hear about, that I think of kind of like the Catholic saints, and where our heart kind of reaches out to them, and they venerate, we can venerate them, and we can kind of think about them. So Avalokiteshvara, this personification, this archetype of compassion. Also Kuan Yin. So Avalokiteshvara is typically understood as the male personification. Kuan Yin, you see her in lots of Chinese restaurants. The female archetype of the same thing. Okay, so compassion. So compassion is practicing wisdom, right? What else do we see here? Yeah.
I just think it's it's just I'm not finding the right words, but it's kind of like a rant against duality. It's about different ways of explaining, that our notion of, always thinking of this, that, good, bad, right, wrong, all these things are just delusions, and get in the way of realizing what's true.
Well, and in fact, it starts with, and Shariputra, a great disciple of the Buddha. So this is, the Buddha is speaking these words to his disciple Shariputra. So when you ever, just to kind of back up and give you the sort of overview, whenever you're dealing with a sutra, that word sutra means these words were something the Buddha said. So the Buddha's explaining to Shariputra. It's like, hey, dude, this is what's going on. I don't think he said dude, but hey, Shariputra, he says. And he's saying, compassion, how does compassion relieve suffering? How do we meet the world with, and what is compassion sees the emptiness in all things. So as you're saying, Andy, it's a rant against dualities and dualism. It's saying like there isn't me and you, there's everything together. And it goes through these different lists, like when I was saying paramitas are a list, it's going through these different lists of classical teachings from South Asia. It's going through a list that the first list it goes through are the skandhas, right? The 5 aggregates, which are, when we hear forms, sensations, perceptions, formations, or consciousness, that's describing what makes something a thing. Like in the way that we might say, okay, body, heart, and mind, like a human is comprised of body, heart, and mind. This is saying, okay, those 5 aggregates, they're empty. It's not just that you are composed of body, heart, and mind, but when we look at body, heart, and mind, those things are composed of each other. Everything is interpenetrating. And then it talks about the 4 noble truths. It says, there's no suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path. Those are the 4 noble truths. And saying, those don't exist either. It's not that they don't exist because something else exists. It's that they're empty because everything is interpenetrating each other. So it's this teaching about wisdom as the interconnection of all things, that there is no this without that. And that when we see that interconnection, we relieve suffering. Why? Why does seeing interconnection relieve suffering? Do you guys have a sense of that?
It almost seems like you're not alone. There's a togetherness there, and that you're relatable to each other.
Yeah.
And you have these discoveries that, hey, I'm going through this experience, and it's a shared experience that people have that.
It's not just me. It's not just me. And that sense I have of I'm here and I'm missing this, and the thing that I'm missing is over there. Or I'm here and I finally have what I need, but someone might take it away, or it might disappear, or I might lose it. That graspy. Or pushing away what I don't want. When I realize everything's interconnected, right? That painfulness of pushing and pulling that I spend so much of my time doing, I don't need to do that. Everything is all here. It's all abundant. It's all shining. It's all brilliant. It's all here. And I always, when I'm thinking about emptiness, I always think about that kind of doubleness for me. And I've experienced this a number of times in my life where I'm like, is this all there is? You ever have that feeling like, really, is this all there is? You get to a point like you've been striving to get a job or get an education or get married or get divorced or whatever, and then you get it and you're like, really, is this all there is? But there's that moment where you're like, is this that moment of disillusionment where you're like, this thing that I wanted so badly, this life that I've been trying to create, really, is this all there is? Where that feeling of emptiness in a bad way can flip over and like, this is all there is. This is all there is. There's nothing missing. And that's the move that the Prajna Paramita literature makes all the time. From this is all there is, to this is all there is. It's all here. This is all? This is all. Wow. Right? And Hojo-san says that his teacher makes this joke that, Buddhists are nihilists, but they're happy about being nihilists. So that's what's at the heart of our tradition. This is all there is. It's all here. That's wisdom, right? And that's also what's at the heart of the paramitas. And if we think about what is giving, what is generosity, this realization that I can really give a gift when I realize that I have nothing to give, right? Like, we're already here. Another example that Hojo-san uses when he talks about babies wanting to feed you, and that way in which the connection between a child and its guardians, where the child isn't thinking you're separate from me, but the sweetness of that, little being trying to feed you, it's sweet precisely because they don't feel separate from you. That's what's at the heart of all this. But now what I wanted to push into today, because this is something I've been grappling for a while with, and because I think it really is at the center of the practicing of the paramitas, and certainly at the center of both Kshanti and virya for sure. Virya is vigor, or total effort. And that is fear. So this series of lines. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on Prajna Paramita. And thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far beyond all inverted views. Those inverted views are those views where there's self and there's other, and the views of duality. One realizes nirvana. But what is this? There is no fear. Bodhisattvas, the adjective that is most commonly tagged onto the word bodhisattva is fearless. And I'm just wondering what that means to you. What fear is, if fear is something that is alive and active in your life, if you feel, fear. Colin?
Well, I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
fear of losing something that,
Yeah.
fear of losing something that I'm like attached to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, and it's totally, if you don't, that's beautiful, and I want to learn from you on that too, but do you feel fear? Is fear an active thing in your life?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you say a little bit more, like how does fear work in your world, and how are you working with fear?
Like an example.
Yeah, however you want to answer that question.
Well, there's a situation with my business that is got a competitor moving in nearby, and that represents a sort of like a risk to my financial security, and so I have a lot of attachment to that, and so yeah, there's a lot of it occupies a lot of my churning and thinking, a lot of financial. I think financial fear is a big one. No, it's like
even though it's like
it doesn't really matter, I guess.
Well,
Like,
I think it probably, I think we all carry fear, and I think it points to, one way that we we especially we Zen students, we people who spend a Tuesday evening sitting in a cold Dharma hall, we crazy people, right? One of the things we do is we beat ourselves up because we think, I shouldn't be afraid. I shouldn't be this. I shouldn't be that. Like, we see the parts of ourselves that we think, why aren't I?
well, I guess what I'm saying is that I've lived two lives. I've lived a life of like having nothing, and like a life of success, and in a lot of ways, having nothing
Was easier.
was way easier, and is very attractive sometimes. So I guess that's why I have a little bit of insight into like,
Okay.
oh well, it doesn't really matter.
Well, so maybe that's not a fear that is such an active fear.
Yeah.
I know I will say that I am very afraid of, I'm not exactly sure what, but whatever it would be to really live my convictions. Like, I'm afraid. I can feel, does this resonate for anyone? I can feel the ways I hold back. Does that? I would never use the word fearless to describe myself. I would be like, nope. And yet I'm like, okay, what is this sutra talking about? What does it mean to be fearless? There's something that's being pointed to here. Does this make sense? Does this resonate with others? I feel like probably I became a Zen student in order to be less fearful. Does that seem true to others? Like this path, and that actually is. So that's one of the things I want to point to, and I really want to encourage you, especially if this does resonate, to just let yourself like kick around the question of fear. Like what am I afraid of? And not as a rhetorical question, like, well, what am I afraid of? There's nothing to be, no, like really, what am I afraid of? To really kick around that question. Because I think in some ways I've been coming to the thought that in a lot of ways, what the paramitas are pointing us to as we circumambulate this wise, loving, awakened heart that is at the center of all of us, that is our heart, the heart. It is love. It is whatever we want. Lots of words for it. As we circumambulate this wise, awakened heart, I think the paramitas are teaching us how to be less afraid. One way or another, that they're all pointing toward a life that is less fearful. So Virya is definitely doing that. So I've got one of my patented handouts here. So whenever I hand these out, it's like, okay, it's always like the temptation is to look at all of the ridiculous amounts of text on it, but we're just going to look at a little bit of it. So this story that we read, or that was, you may not have read it, I mean, that's okay too. The story that is in this book that comes from the tradition, the Jataka, and we won't look at the handout just yet, but I'm just going to talk about the story a bit. It's a great story. So it's the story of the sticky hair monster. And again, these are ancient stories, and they're stories about the Buddha's life before he was the Buddha. And they're like fables, right? They're like parables. We can just relate to them as stories that are illuminating, like dreams that are illuminating the facets of what's being taught. So did anyone read the story who can give us a synopsis? Otherwise I can, but shall I just go for it? Do you want to say some words about it, Andy?
I mean, I can do a short synopsis if you want.
Well, all right. I'll just dive in, and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
So, and it's, of all the stories that we've looked at, it's the one that's like most like, like the Princess Bride or something. It's funny, and it's anyway, it's perfect. So this is in a time in eons before he becomes Siddhartha and becomes the Buddha of our realm. The Bodhisattva is born as a prince who comes from a very good family, very happy, and says to his father, says, "What do you want to do with his life?" And it's like, I want to be a really, really good warrior, and I want to learn the 5 martial arts. And his father's like, "Great." So he's already coming from a place of really good parenting, and that seems important. A place of privilege and good parenting. That seems helpful for when you go forth into the world with virya. It's nice to come from a good home. It's harder when you come from places of trauma and discomfort. But he goes forth into training, and he learns the 5 different martial arts, like using a spear, using a club, using all these different tools. And then he goes on a quest. Basically, he gets so good. He's like, I'm going to stride forth into the world, and I'm going to do good, like a knight in shining armor, from like Western tradition. He goes into the woods, and he comes upon a place where there's a barricade and soldiers, and the soldiers are like, whoa, 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 young man, don't go into that wood. You don't want to go into that wood. Why not? Because Sticky Hair Monster is in that wood. I love these names. Sticky Hair Monster is in that wood, and he will rip you limb from limb and drink your blood and crush your bones and chew on your sinews, and he kills everything. Don't go. The prince, who's now named Prince 5 Weapons because he's mastered all these 5 weapons. Prince 5 Weapons, like, of course I'm going to go into the wood. Like, why did I stride forth into the world if I'm going to be turned aside at the first blockade? And so he goes into the wood, and lo and behold, he comes across Sticky Hair Monster, who's like, incredibly huge and big and scary and terrifying in all the ways you want to envision the terrifying, scary monster. You can see the Pixar film based on this. You totally can see the Pixar film. And Sticky Hair Monster's like so used to just appearing and everybody being scared, and the story repeats over and over again. Was Prince 5 Weapons afraid? No, he was not afraid. He was not afraid. It says that over and over again. He's not afraid. So he starts with one weapon, and the weapon sticks in the Sticky Hair Monster's sticky hair. Doesn't affect him. He shoots arrows. He hits him he goes through all 5 weapons, and the Sticky Hair Monster's like, yeah, you can't touch me. But each time he does it, he's not afraid. He's undaunted. And then he's used up all his weapons. He's like, well, I still have my legs. My legs are really strong. They can split boulders. So he starts kicking at sticky hair monsters, first with his right leg and it sticks, and then with his left leg, and so he's stuck. And then he's like, well, I've got my fists. My fists can break mountaintops. And now he's like stuck to sticky hair monsters. Sticky hair monsters just waiting for, what. And then he's like, okay, well, I can use my head. So he uses his head, and now he's completely stuck to sticky hair monster. But he's still not afraid. And at that point, sticky hair monster's like, what is going on? This prince must have a secret weapon or something, because everyone else would have been terrified long ago. But Prince Five Weapons is like, I came into this to give my all. I'm going to give everything I have. And so sticky hair monster says, why aren't you shivering in your bones? Why aren't you dead yet? And sticky hair monster says, well, in my gut, I have the sword of wisdom, and it will slice you in pieces. So if you swallow me, I'll just kill you from the inside. And sticky hair monster's like, whoo, okay, never mind. Unsticks the prince and says, okay, good. You're free to go. And the prince says, not so fast. You're not free to go yet. You got to mend your ways. And sticky hair monster's like, yeah, I do, because I'm not happy. I'm not enjoying any of this. I don't really want to crush people's bones and drink their blood and chew on their sinews. I don't want to do that anymore. And the prince says, okay, so you're going to use your strength. You're going to turn this tangled, gnarly wood into an open thoroughfare. You're going to be nice to everybody. You're going to help children. You're going to help the little ladies across the creeks. You're going to do all that. And okay. And sticky hair monster says, well, yeah, but I killed a lot of people. And the prince says, okay, there are going to be lifetimes where you're going to have to reckon with that karma. But if you do good now, it won't be so bad. You'll work through some of that karma. And so Prince Five Weapons leaves. Everybody's like, woo, Prince Five Weapons. He becomes King Five Weapons. And sticky hair monster lives a life of doing good and turns the gnarled, tangled wood into an open, beautiful thoroughfare. And, I don't think he changes his name, but he's no longer a monster. He's still got sticky hair, though. And then, the Bodhisattva and sticky hair monster meet in later lives. They play out this karma, and ultimately in the story of the Buddha of our time, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the bandit Angulimala, which is a great story, but we won't talk about that. So that's the story of sticky hair monster, and it is exemplifying this spirit of virya. So this is what Rafe Martin says at the top of your page. That first quote, which I think is just like a great question, like, what are you afraid of? That's from Rafe as well. On your journey out, like Prince Five Weapons, how far do you want to go? And he says, going all the way to that bottomless bottom, virya carries the day, gets us to the end of the road, where what we're really looking for is hard to miss. And that the quote in the fourth paragraph below that, with the tigress, this is also from Rafe Martin, with the tigress, the story of the hungry tigress that I talked about on Sunday, and when we were studying Dana, the bodhisattva gets totally eaten up. With the monster, the bodhisattva totally swings his sword using every ounce of strength, every weapon he's got, never slackening. And Rafe Martin quotes Philip Kapler-Roshi, who was his teacher, or one of his teachers. He says, the enlightened person has her yes and her no. So that image of Dana, of the giving of the bodhisattva with the tigress, it's like, I give everything to this being. That's my yes. The image of Prince Five Weapons with sticky hair monster is like total no, but it's total. Totally, like I'm gonna be completely insanely stuck here. So I'm just wondering about how that make, like, what would it mean to like completely give yourself totally? What does that look like? Does that even make sense as a Are there sticky hair monsters in your world? Andy, you're nodding your head.
Well, it's about trying every day and failing and then keep trying and keep going and feel like, you know, you're gonna lose and there's no hope, just keep trying.
How does that, I mean, to me, I think, and I put in this picture here because I wanted to talk a little bit about the Martin Luther King stuff that I brought up last week and mentioned briefly in the Dharma talk on Sunday. Do you guys recognize that photograph? Do you remember that? The photograph at the bottom there. This is this nurse, Aisha Evans, who was protesting in Baton Rouge. This was in the context of the killings of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. And this image, like totally, like just standing there. I'm just, yeah. So Martin Luther King talking in 1965, when we sing, "We Shall Overcome," we are singing a hymn of faith, a hymn of optimism, a hymn of faith in the future. I can still sing that song because I have faith in the future. I believe that we as Negroes are going to gain our freedom in America because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with the destiny of America. Yes, we shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right, no lie can live forever. Talk about that other picture in a little bit, but that, you know, that sort of absolute standing. Is that virya? Is that kshanti? Is that patience? Rafe Martin says about patience, he says, holding back, this is in the box quote, holding back, holding on, when you have the power, ability, and opportunity to hit back, to pay back a wrong done to you, is forbearance. Not striking back is in fact a generous gift of space and of time, a door through which reality itself might enter, where things can settle, and there might yet be opportunity for change. I think one of the questions I have is, what is the difference between holding back and sticking forward into, between that absolute no and that absolute yes? Does that question make sense? And do you know, the example you gave, Andy, of like, you know, you keep going at it, although you fail. I'm wondering if people have other examples of either that holding back, that totally holding back instead of striking out, or the total pushing in at the sticky hair monster, if people have specific examples of that so that we can get a little more concrete. Colin, is that a thought or just a breath?
No, it's a breath.
Yeah. Does this make sense though? You're jumping into the class in the middle, but does this make sense?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
In my life, one situation or scenario that relates to this, I feel, is my relationships with my father, and having to, like, there have been times where I've held myself back for like a myriad of reasons, fear being one of them, impatience being another, and the list goes on. And then other times where I put myself in fully, and it's not changing anything necessarily, it's not making anything better, but still like trying really hard to just like step up.
Yeah.
But yeah, same situation but different. Like this illustrated in my life.
So when you put yourself in fully, what does that feel like?
It's challenging.
Yeah.
feels like yeah. It feels important. Yeah.
Feels important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like for him.
You showing up fully for him. It feels important. How about showing up for you?
And I am in turn showing up for myself because I'm not turning from his suffering.
Yeah.
And peace.
So that's, yeah. So there's always that question though, right? Of like, am I pushing myself into harm just because I think it's the right thing to do? Or am I like, what does it mean what does it mean to go all in? One of the differences I think between Kshanti and Virya that seems important, they're the kind of forbearance and constancy of Kshanti, where the classic description of this is like, turning the other cheek in Christianity. Like, I could strike out, I could fight back, but I'm not going to. There is that sense of having some power and restraint, right? That I could do something. I could really tell you what I think about you, but I'm not gonna. I could really start, but I'm not gonna. And so asking ourselves, like, well, what does it mean to hold back? To really hold back? Like, why am I doing it? What is that gesture about? And then Virya, what does it mean to really push in, to push against resistance, evil even sometimes, to really push myself? Both of these are ways of putting my all. But how do we know when we're doing that skillfully and we're not just sacrificing ourselves?
It's really hard. It's really hard to know.
Yeah.
When to push and when to hold back. And I work for the county with the vaccine clinics and helping with security, and we had protesters coming out when they didn't come out until we started vaccinating kids, and it was really hard because you could see that kids were being traumatized. I mean, these people were shouting that they were killing their kids and stuff like that. And I was kind of in charge of the security and figuring out strategies to deal with this, and it was really difficult because first reaction is to shout at them and tell them they're all wrong, and but so it was hard, but that is a particular time I could think of. Holding back was super important.
Why was it important?
Well, because shouting back and arguing would just escalate things, and it wasn't helping get the kids into the clinic as soon as possible to and we did some other things. There was one time we were playing loud music and stuff, and
You had your strategies.
And, trying to,
but I would say that why that felt important, and I think it's an example that illustrates something really powerful, is you're really attuned to the kids, right? And to it's like in the story of the hungry tigress, this idea that why give yourself, why sacrifice your life for this starving tigress? It's not because it's not for like the utilitarian value of, I need to feed the tigress, or I should not feed the tigress because I need to live and teach my students, or it's not for that calculus. It's like, here is a soul that, a tender-hearted soul that is in danger of being totally degraded. And so the same experience with the kids, like, I need to safeguard this tender heart. And that only will get hardened if I start fighting with those people, right? Like the whole point of this is that love and taking care of and healing activity. That's the whole point. So how do I hold fast to that? And I think in moments where we're like, I know what the whole point of this is, right? I think in those moments, it becomes a little bit easier. In moments like what you're describing, I think it's harder. It's like, what is this? What am I circumambulating here exactly? Where is wisdom here? And it can become, I think a lot of moments are confusing where it's not clear what we're safeguarding. Does that make sense? How about when the sticky monster, like the Cookie Monster? I can totally picture the Pixar version of this, I mean, I think there have been many movies of this with like a scary monster who then is human, right? This is like, it's like Shrek, right? This is Shrek. The sticky hairy monster, in all of these stories, they have different characters, right? But the whole point of the Jataka tales is this is us. Even if it's telling the stories of the Buddha's past life or who the Buddha is interacting with, all these lives are our life. I, together with all beings, this is all us. And so, it's always valuable, I think, in these stories to think, okay, well, where's the sticky hairy monster in me? Like, what parts of me? What does it mean for me to encounter my own sticky hairy monster? Or sticky hairy, sticky and hairy and a monster. Does that make sense as a question? How do I work with my own sticky hair monster? Does anyone have a sticky hair monster in themselves that they were willing to talk about? For me, it always comes down to anger, my anger. What do I do with the parts of me? What do I do with the parts of me that are monstrous, that I deem monstrous? And then I also think, when we're talking about family members, since that's like our family, it's like parts of me, them, me, what do we do with the parts of who we are that are monstrous to us? How do we meet them? That's an actual question. If anyone has any thought, if you've been grappling with this.
Well, one of the things I've noticed just from my practice is sort of like is tuning into my body. I don't know if that has any practical parallel in Buddhism or not, but when I'm when it comes to like when I'm getting angry, I feel there's some kind of intense feeling in my body before I even do anything, or when I'm in a position where I'm making a personal sacrifice that I shouldn't make.
That you should make or shouldn't
that maybe I want to make, but I shouldn't make. There's like a conflict that I started, that I can sort of see. And it's not always easy to make the right choice, but I think it's easier than it was like 2 years ago, certainly.
Yeah, I like you bringing attention, Colin, to the embodied sensations, because I think part of like this is where mindfulness can help us. Like we notice. I mean, it used to be that the sticky hair monster is just like that. Was just, all like Jataka tales or Marvel comics. Like you know, same thing. So think of the Incredible Hulk, the story of the Incredible Hulk. Do people know does that, Bruce, like that is a classic Jataka tale for our times, right? That you get angry and the Hulk emerges, right? This monster emerges. And so what does Bruce Banner need to do? He needs to get really mindful of like, oh, there's the monster, and he has to sort of come into relationship with it, right? So mindfulness is this incredible tool because we start to see how the part that we would like to reject, we'd like to just push away, we start to see it emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can be in relationship with it, as opposed to having it be yet another thing that we're trying to get rid of because we don't like it. So that's an amazing thing. Yeah. And, you know, we were talking a couple weeks ago about shame. I think the sticky hair monster for a lot of us can come forward as shame. A shame monster, that, you know, that sense of just the total dark. Have any of you seen the cartoon Soul? You guys, you have to watch it. You have to watch it because there's sticky hair monsters in that are really about shame. You know, this side of us is just like, I want to be in the dark. You know, that kind of, what is that even? You know, that just that total, that part of us that recoils from being seen because it feels so bad and so abject. So how do we come into relationship with that? You know, and then I'm more mundane, you know, like the stuff where, like, how do I get out of bed? I mean, I don't come to this endo at 4:30 in the morning, but for those of you who do get out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, and in the days when I did, I get out of bed at 5:45. That feels plenty early. But, you know, that kind of relationship to our own aspiration, where it's like, how do I work with that side of myself that wants to do something, and then the side of myself that doesn't want to do anything? You know, this idea of going all in, of the bodhisattva has her yes and has her no, and that totality of going all in. Seems to me that's really what that is an invitation to, is, can I make friends with all the parts of myself? And what does that look like? Does it, I can't tell. Does this resonate? Does this, yeah. I put this picture here on the back. I don't know if you've seen this one. I mean, I work in a hospital. That's COVID, right? COVID and a nurse. And I was struck by, like, that there seems to be this meme in our culture. You know, there's Aisha Evans, who people were like, she's like a Botticelli goddess. She's standing so strong. And she's a nurse, as it turns out. And then the COVID hits a few years later, and then we have this picture of the nurse doing, I mean, Aisha in her moment of confrontation with the forces of sticky hair monsters, the police, she doesn't give them the finger. But it's a very similar pose, and it struck me like this is like something we like to do. We like to elevate these people who, you know, we want to see that heroic standing strong in the face of evil or of intimidation. We love that. But as someone who went to work for, you know, 2.5 years in a building that had emblazoned on the outside, heroes work here, it was a little annoying. So I wanted to invite this idea too, the ways in which that vision of the heroic standing fast in the face of what's difficult, that it's problematic. So I wonder if someone can read that last quote from MLK at the bottom of the page, the let nobody.
Let nobody give you the impression that the problem of racial injustice will work itself out. Let nobody give you the impression that only time will solve the problem. That is a myth, and it is a myth because time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. And I'm absolutely convinced that the people of ill will in our nation, the extreme rightists, the forces committed to negative ends, have used time much more effectively than the people of goodwill. It may well be that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic works and violent actions of the bad people who bomb a church in Birmingham, Alabama, or shoot down a civil rights worker in Selma, but for the appalling silence and indifference of the good people who sit around and say, "Wait on time." Somewhere we must come to see that human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals. Without this hard work, time becomes an ally of the primitive forces of socialist stagnation. So we must help time and realize that the time is always right to do right.
What do you guys make of that quote?
Amen.
It kind of sounds as appropriate now as it did 60 years ago, right? It's like, wait a minute, why are we still in the same place? Yeah. And I was struck with this way in which like images, like, I mean, this is I find this an incredibly inspiring image. And I remember when this image came out and I was like, yeah, fuck you, COVID. But there's a way in which this sort of sense of how important it is to be a hero, to stand fast, that kind of lets off the hook of the systems of oppression, etc. Like this, the quote that I have right above the Martin Luther King quote: "Sadly, stories of organizational accountability don't stick like tales of individual heroism." Like we love thinking about heroic activity of individuals, but it's a lot harder to think about, like institutions being accountable. So I'm wondering, like, just sort of a general question here, like this, I think sometimes in Zen, we talk about a lot of stuff that's, how am I working on this in my life? And that's really crucial. And then we talk maybe in broad terms about like engaged Buddhism, like how do we work in the world? But I'm wondering how those two things go together. Does that make sense as a question? How does working on our own sticky hair monsters, how does that help transform the world? Does it help transform the world? What do you think, Eshe?
Good question.
Well, what do you feel?
It's like, it seems so obvious. Like, of course, what we bring to the world, how we're able to interact with it is dependent on our whole being, and of course, like cultivating these qualities, then is translated in our everyday life, and nothing's isolated. So no occurrence of good or evil is isolated, but it's difficult to even think in that way, like, oh, is my action or your action or individual understandings of how things work and working on them and really trying with force to make things change, like, is that thinking about those things can be really daunting because it's so impossible. It's so so it's just not tangible.
Yeah.
So it seems so obvious, but it's so not apparent often.
It's
Discouraging. It can be discouraging.
yeah. We can't actually see the big picture. We can't. We're unable to. And again, like the calculus of, impact and change, it will never work in our favor to help us see the impact of our actions. Like the scale that we can, when we try to work on scale, we're so stuck in the limitation of the particulars of our individual limited life. And so the calculus never pays off, right? Like what would it mean if that was the framework? What would it mean to think that the work that I do on myself, how would I see that the work I do on myself has, right? Does that make sense? So how do you guys work with the discouragement, or is this not so much of an issue? Or are we okay because the world is okay? We're wrong. There are no problems anywhere. No, there's sticky hair monsters everywhere.
No.
I mean, for me, the concept of karma is helpful, whether I believe in actual, reincarnation, it's just
good.
Something to visualize is the right word, but something to articulate, and it kind of makes sense. So
So that we can sort of think, okay, so everything counts and everything's interconnected, and so you can sort of do the mental imaginative leap of like, given enough time. But then you think about climate change and you're like, but there's not enough time. The world is just, right? Like, I think that's where climate change gets a lot of people to fall down. So here's what like the perfections keep saying to us over and over again. And Virya is the one that says it the most strongly, because Virya is the perfection of go all in. That's Virya's like, go, keep going, just all in. And it can be a mantra, go all in, give it my all. It's like what the perfections keep inviting is a shift of perspective, where it's like, okay, if I earnestly keep trying to bring everything I am to this moment, that is everything. That is everything. There's nothing's left out. To bring everything I am is to bring the heart of wisdom to this moment. Nothing is left out. But, I don't know exactly what it means to bring everything that I am. So this is where that kind of mindfulness that you're talking about, Colin, I think is really helpful. Like, what am I leaving out? This is where I think fear is really helpful. Because my fears tell me that I'm still holding in, I'm still defending, I'm still putting up the walls as if I'm separate. And that doesn't mean that I bust through my fears, because that's just another reactivity that is tied to fear. Being counterphobic. Have you ever heard that expression? Like people who are afraid of things, and then there are people who are counterphobic, and they do all the scariest things, which doesn't mean that they don't have fear. It means that they're doing everything they can to fight their fear, which means they're still afraid, right? Fear is not to be busted through, but it lets me know, all right, I'm still here in the shame monster, or I'm still here in the sticky hair monster. I'm not just meeting the shame monster, meeting the sticky hair monster. I'm not just coming forward. So we can start to feel those ways in which not we're holding back, but we're holding out. We're holding a whole world that we could be in relationship with out. Does that make sense? So here's your assignment over the week to genuinely ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And then to genuinely look around you for the sticky hair monster that you're living with right in your own life. For the Incredible Hulk, or whatever it is, the Yeti, the Shrek, whatever monster it is that you are carrying with you, to invite some connection with that monster. Yeah. Okay. And watch the film Soul. It's really great.